Short title: He pretended not to know his ex-wife. Then everything changed. Script: Jason Carter looked straight at his ex-wife across a luxury charity gala in Manhattan and acted like he had never seen her before. Eleanor Whitmore stood alone in a simple navy dress, while Jason laughed beside his glamorous new girlfriend. "Some people just never move up," he muttered, loud enough for Eleanor to hear. She didn't react. She just gave the smallest smile. Minutes later, a black Cadillac pulled up outside. A sharply dressed older man stepped out, walked directly to Eleanor, and handed her a sealed envelope with a silver crest. Jason frowned. Who was that? Then staff members who had ignored Eleanor all night suddenly stood straighter. One whispered, "Miss Whitmore." Jason's girlfriend went pale. "Wait, Whitmore." Jason laughed it off until he saw the name on the envelope. His smile disappeared. Whitmore Global Holdings. The billion-dollar empire everyone in that room respected. Eleanor calmly turned toward the exit as executives rushed to greet her. Jason pushed through the crowd. "Eleanor, wait." She paused, but didn't turn around. Then one executive said the words that changed everything. "The board is waiting for the only heir." Jason froze. The woman he discarded was about to inherit everything. But that's not even the real secret behind why she kept it hidden. Full story in the long video. Description: Ex-husband regrets leaving her English story meets billionaire secret reveal in this emotional American drama. Ex-husband regrets leaving her English story. Fans will love this shocking reversal. Ex-husband regrets leaving her English story gets a billionaire twist you won't expect. A man humiliates his ex-wife at a luxury gala, only to discover she is the only heiress to a billion-dollar empire. This emotional story is packed with regret, hidden identity, betrayal, and the ultimate power reversal. Watch the full long-form story for the shocking truth behind Eleanor's secret. Touching family stories. Tags: Ex-husband regrets leaving her English story. CEO husband reveals undercover wife. He humiliated his ex-wife at a party. Mrs. Morgan billionaire story English. Life lessons emotional story love and betrayal. Billionaire story. Emotional story. Hidden identity reveal. Revenge story. Relationship drama. Luxury lifestyle drama. American storytelling. Viral emotional story. Touching family stories. Billionaire heiress reveal. Ex-wife comeback. Regret story. Shocking reveal. YouTube shorts. Story hashtags. Hashtag shorts. Hashtag emotional story. Hashtag billionaire reveal. Hashtag hidden identity. Hashtag relationship drama. Pinned comment. If you were Jason and discovered the woman you threw away was the only billionaire heir, would you beg for a second chance? The fastest way to realize you destroyed your own future is to watch the person you underestimated walk into a room where everyone else already knows her worth. Jason Carter adjusted the cuff of his tailored charcoal suit and scanned the grand ballroom of the Harrington Children's Foundation Gala like a man who belonged exactly where he stood. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across polished marble floors. Waiters moved gracefully with silver trays, and conversations floated through the air in that polished Manhattan tone where everyone sounded casually important. This was Jason's world now, or at least the world he had worked hard to enter. 3 years ago, he had promised himself he would never again be tied to anything that slowed him down. Tonight was proof he had made the right decisions. At least that was what he believed until he saw her. Eleanor stood near the edge of the ballroom, one hand lightly holding a glass of sparkling water, dressed in a simple navy gown that somehow looked more elegant than half the designer labels in the room. No dramatic jewelry, no attempt to demand attention, just quiet composure. Jason felt the strange jolt of recognition before his expression hardened. Beside him, Vanessa, radiant and effortlessly social, followed his gaze. "Do you know her?" she asked. Jason barely hesitated. No one important. The lie came smoothly, but something in his chest tightened anyway. Eleanor looked in his direction then, and for one suspended second their eyes met. There was no anger in hers, no pleading, no bitterness. That somehow bothered him more than if she had looked hurt. Jason turned away first. "Come on," he said to Vanessa, steering her toward a cluster of investors. "There are actual useful people here." He said it lightly, but loud enough for Eleanor to hear if she wanted to. Vanessa laughed politely, unaware of the history compressed into that moment. Jason accepted a drink from a passing server and forced himself back into conversation, but his attention kept drifting. Eleanor wasn't supposed to be here. Events like this required connections, money, invitations from people who mattered. During their marriage, Eleanor had never shown interest in any of this. She had preferred quiet. Dinners, long walks, evenings spent reading while he worked. Back then, he had interpreted her calm as lack of ambition, lack of hunger, lack of compatibility with the life he wanted. Eventually, he convinced himself leaving had been strategic, not cruel. Efficient, not selfish. Seeing her here unsettled that narrative. "You're distracted," Vanessa said, touching his arm. "Big client across the room," Jason lied. Vanessa smiled. "Then go charm him." Jason did what he did best. He moved through conversations with polished confidence, shaking hands, dropping names, laughing at precisely the right moments. But every time he glanced across the room, Eleanor remained strangely untouched by the social choreography around her. She wasn't networking. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply stood there as though she had every right to be present without needing approval. That confidence irritated him. An hour later, as guests gathered near the central stage for announcements, Jason found himself passing within a few feet of her, close enough to notice details he hadn't expected. The familiar softness in her expression, the same calm posture he once mistook for weakness. Eleanor looked at him directly. Jason, just his name. Nothing more. No accusation. No surprise. He forced a thin smile. "Eleanor." Vanessa approached beside him, looping her arm through his. "Friend?" she asked. Jason's answer came too fast. "Ancient history." Eleanor's expression didn't change. "I see." Something about her composure made him defensive. "Some people," he said, glancing over her understated dress, "never really level up." Vanessa gave an awkward little laugh, uncertain whether she had missed a joke. Eleanor held Jason's gaze for one quiet beat, then smiled in a way he couldn't read. Not hurt, not impressed, almost knowing. "Enjoy your evening," she said. Then she walked away. Jason exhaled as though he had won something. But less than 10 minutes later, the energy in the room shifted. Near the entrance, conversations softened. Heads turned. Outside the towering glass doors, a black Cadillac had pulled to the curb. A silver-haired gentleman in an immaculate suit stepped out, carrying a sealed black envelope marked with an unfamiliar crest. He entered with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need introduction. Jason watched as the man ignored donors, executives, and board members, walking directly toward Eleanor. The older gentleman stopped in front of Eleanor and inclined his head with unmistakable respect. "Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice low but clear enough for nearby guests to hear. "My apologies for the delay. Traffic leaving the Upper East Side was worse than anticipated." Eleanor accepted the black envelope with calm familiarity, as though this were the most ordinary interaction in the world. "Thank you, Mr. Ashford," she replied. Jason felt something shift inside him. Vanessa looked between them. "Did he say Whitmore?" she whispered. Jason said nothing. He was too busy watching Eleanor break the seal with elegant precision and glance at whatever was inside. Her expression barely changed, but the silver-haired man gave a small nod, almost as if confirming something significant. Around them, the room's energy subtly transformed. A board member Jason had spent months trying to impress straightened immediately. A woman from a private equity firm stepped closer, her expression suddenly attentive. Jason knew social behavior. He knew hierarchy. This was not random courtesy. Vanessa tightened her grip on his arm. "Jason, who exactly is she?" "My ex-wife," he said before he could stop himself. Vanessa turned sharply toward him. "You're what?" But Jason barely heard her. His mind was no longer in the ballroom. It had been dragged backward into years he preferred to remember selectively. When he first met Eleanor, she had been reading alone in a quiet corner of a bookstore cafe in Boston, wearing a cream sweater and looking entirely uninterested in the performance most people put on when they noticed someone attractive nearby. He had approached her because she seemed different. At first, different had fascinated him. Eleanor listened more than she spoke. She remembered details. She asked thoughtful questions instead of rehearsed ones. Their first dates were simple. Coffee, walks through Beacon Hill, late conversations in small restaurants where nobody cared who sat at the next table. Jason had loved how grounded she made him feel when his own ambitions were still forming. Back then, he was a junior consultant with expensive taste and limited means, convinced success was always one promotion away. Eleanor never complained about his long hours, never pressured him, never demanded displays of affection for social media or attention from his colleagues. She supported him quietly, in ways that felt effortless at first. But as Jason climbed professionally, something changed. Or perhaps something in him simply became louder. Success exposed his insecurities instead of curing them. He became more conscious of appearances, social circles, status symbols. Dinners shifted from neighborhood spots to invitation-only venues. Conversations shifted from ideas to influence. Eleanor did not change with him. At least that was how he interpreted it. "You should come to these networking events more," he used to tell her. "I am happy if they matter to you," she would say. "They do not have to matter to me the same way." That answer frustrated him. He wanted enthusiasm, strategic partnership, visible ambition. What he saw instead was restraint. "You do not care about getting ahead," he told her once after a company holiday dinner. "That is not true," she replied gently. "I just define ahead differently." He had laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because it sounded impractical. Over time, Jason began translating Eleanor's calm into weakness. Her privacy became secrecy. Her contentment became passivity. Her refusal to impress others became social incompetence in his mind. There had been signs he missed, of course. Strange details that never fit his assumptions. The occasional handwritten note arriving by courier. Her habit of taking certain phone calls in private, not suspiciously, just discreetly. Her quiet but exact understanding of business language despite claiming little interest in corporate culture. Once, during a discussion about a merger headline, she casually predicted the acquiring company would fail within 18 months because of leadership misalignment. She had been correct. Jason asked where she learned that analysis. She only smiled and changed the subject. He never pressed because certainty from Eleanor somehow annoyed him. The final fracture had not come from one dramatic betrayal. It had come from accumulation. Jason growing sharper, more impatient. Eleanor growing quieter, more distant. Then came Vanessa, although not immediately in the romantic sense. Vanessa represented the world Jason wanted access to. Fast-moving, socially connected, image-conscious. She understood ambition as competition, not reflection. She admired Jason openly. That admiration became intoxicating. By the time Jason admitted his marriage was ending, emotionally, he had already left. The divorce itself had been efficient. Lawyers, signatures, minimal conflict. Eleanor never begged him to stay, which he interpreted as confirmation he had mattered less than he thought. "Maybe this is best," she had said in the final conversation. "Maybe," he replied coldly. He remembered waiting for visible heartbreak, some sign he was difficult to lose. Instead, she simply nodded with unbearable composure. That memory irritated him for months. Vanessa had entered his life fully afterward, fitting neatly into the version of success he wanted to project. Looking back now, standing in the gala, Jason realized how much of his certainty had depended on Eleanor remaining exactly as he had defined her. Ordinary, safe, left behind. "Jason," Vanessa said sharply, dragging him back. "You never mentioned she was a Whitmore." "I did not know," he said, and for the first time the words sounded weak even to him. "How do you not know your own wife's last name?" "Ex-wife. That is not the part one am confused about." Across the room, Eleanor was now speaking with the same private equity executive who had ignored Jason earlier. The woman was smiling warmly. Mr. Ashford remained close, protective but unobtrusive. Jason noticed something else then. Eleanor was not introducing herself. People already knew who she was, or knew enough to instantly understand her importance once the name connected. A younger executive standing nearby leaned toward another guest and whispered, "I heard her father has been ill." "I thought succession was unresolved," the other murmured. Jason's pulse quickened. "Succession?" Vanessa stared at him. "Jason, what exactly did you walk away from?" He opened his mouth, but no answer came. Because for the first time, he was forced to consider a possibility more uncomfortable than regret. What if he had never actually known Eleanor at all? Then, from across the ballroom, Eleanor lifted her gaze and met his once more. This time her expression held something unmistakable. Not triumph, not anger, simply recognition, as though she understood exactly what questions were finally beginning to form in his mind. Jason had spent years believing information was power, and in that moment, standing beneath the chandeliers with a half-finished drink in his hand, he realized how dangerous it was to discover that everyone else might know something you did not. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice. Tell me this is some weird coincidence. Jason kept his eyes on Eleanor. Whitmore is not exactly a rare name. Even as he said it, he knew how weak it sounded. Vanessa gave him a look that made clear she knew it too. Across the ballroom, Eleanor moved through conversations with composed ease, but what unsettled Jason was not that people were speaking to her. It was how they were speaking to her. Not with curiosity, with familiarity. Respect that. Suggested history, not introduction. A silver-haired donor Jason had unsuccessfully pursued for months shook Eleanor's hand with visible warmth. A foundation trustee smiled at her, as though reconnecting with someone important. This was not the awkward discovery of an unexpected guest. This was recognition. I need another drink, Vanessa muttered. Jason barely heard her. He was replaying details he had ignored for years. The expensive but understated watch Eleanor once wore and claimed had belonged to her grandfather. The private school education she had brushed off as unimportant. The way she understood etiquette at formal dinners despite claiming she disliked them. At the time, he had assumed she was simply observant. Now those memories rearranged themselves into something else. Jason Carter. He turned sharply. A man in his late 50s with sharp features and a polished navy tuxedo extended a hand. Richard Halston. We met at the Morgan restructuring dinner. Jason immediately recognized him. Old money. Connected everywhere. Jason shook his hand quickly. Of course. Halston smiled politely, then glanced toward Eleanor. Interesting evening. Apparently, Jason said carefully. Halston tilted his head. I did not realize you knew Miss Whitmore. Jason chose his words cautiously. We were married. Halston's eyebrows lifted just slightly. That tiny reaction landed harder than open shock. Were you? He said. Not judgmental. Merely surprised. Small world. Then he smiled in the restrained way powerful people did when choosing not to say more. Excuse me. He walked directly toward Eleanor. Jason stood frozen. Vanessa returned with champagne. That looked bad. What? That face he made when you said you were married to her. Jason said nothing. Because she was right. It had not been admiration. It had been disbelief. On stage, a foundation representative began routine remarks about charitable initiatives, but Jason could not focus. His attention kept drifting to fragments of nearby conversations. The board meeting was inevitable. Depends whether she accepts full control. After everything with her father, who else could? Jason turned toward the voices, but the speakers lowered their tones as soon as they noticed him looking. His pulse accelerated. Vanessa crossed her arms. I feel like I accidentally walked into a sequel without seeing the first movie. Jason finally exhaled sharply. Enough. No, not enough. You dismissed your ex-wife in front of me like she was some nobody, and now executives are acting like royalty just arrived. Jason's jaw tightened. I said I did not know. That is the weird part. Before he could answer, movement near the entrance drew attention again. 2 additional men in dark suits entered, speaking quietly with Mr. Ashford. Security? Legal counsel? Jason could not tell. But they were not ordinary staff. Eleanor glanced toward them, gave a small nod, then returned to conversation as though these arrivals were expected. Vanessa stared. Jason. He ignored her and moved closer to the edge of the gathering, pretending interest in the event program while positioning himself near a cluster of investors. One voice carried clearly enough. I heard she refused to move back into the family residence. After what happened, I do not blame her. Still, if the transition becomes public tonight, the rest disappeared beneath applause from the stage. Transition. Public tonight. Jason's thoughts raced. He remembered one strange conversation from years earlier. Eleanor had once canceled a weekend trip because of a family obligation in New York. He had accused her of being vague. She only said, some responsibilities are complicated. He had rolled his eyes and booked dinner with colleagues instead. Another memory surfaced. A call that came late one evening. Eleanor answering softly, then going pale before saying she needed to travel for a day. She claimed her father was unwell. Jason had barely looked up from his laptop. Send flowers, he had said sarcastically. Eleanor had simply left. Now a cold realization crept in. What if every unexplained moment had actually been the truth, and he had dismissed it because the truth did not match his assumptions? Across the room, Eleanor laughed softly at something Mr. Halston said. It was a familiar sound, one Jason had not heard in years. Strange how memory worked. He had once believed her quietness meant emptiness. Now he wondered if she had simply stopped sharing herself with someone who never listened. Then Mr. Ashford approached Eleanor again and leaned in to say something brief. Her expression changed for the first time all evening. Not dramatically, just a measured stillness that made everyone around her subtly step back. She handed him the envelope, then turned slightly toward the private corridor beyond the ballroom. As she did, Jason saw the embossed crest more clearly. Whitmore Global Holdings. And underneath, in smaller lettering, Office of the Chairman. Jason stared at the embossed lettering as though the words might rearrange themselves into something less devastating if he looked long enough. Office of the Chairman. Whitmore Global Holdings. Not a social coincidence. Not a shared surname. Not some distant relation exaggerated by gossip. Something real. Something massive. Eleanor disappeared with Mr. Ashford into the private corridor, and for the first time all evening, Jason moved without calculation. I will be right back, he said. Vanessa caught his sleeve. Absolutely not. You cannot just chase your ex-wife into some executive backroom. I just need clarity. That sounds suspiciously emotional for a man who claimed she was ancient history. He pulled free anyway, but before he reached the corridor, a discreet security presence stepped into his path. Not aggressive. Simply immovable. Private access, sir. Jason forced a polite smile. I know Miss Whitmore. The man's expression did not change. Private access, sir. Jason stepped back, humiliation heating his face. He knew that feeling. Not being physically rejected, but socially repositioned. Classified instantly as someone without clearance. Vanessa appeared beside him, lowering her voice. This keeps getting worse. Do not start. I am not starting. Reality is. Before Jason could respond, the foundation chair returned to the stage, this time with an energy that suggested the formal program had shifted. Ladies and gentlemen, she began. Before concluding tonight's commitments, we have an unexpected acknowledgement to make. Conversations quieted. Many of you are aware that the Whitmore Foundation has long supported our mission privately, often without public recognition. Jason felt every muscle tighten. Tonight, we wish to extend our gratitude directly to a member of that family whose leadership may soon shape far more than philanthropy. Vanessa turned slowly toward him. Oh no. Eleanor emerged from the corridor. But she was not alone. Mr. Ashford walked beside her. Richard Halston stood nearby. Two board members Jason recognized from financial publications positioned themselves as though this moment mattered beyond charity. The room changed around her. It was subtle but unmistakable. Space opened. Attention aligned. People who ignored nearly everyone else straightened instinctively. Eleanor looked exactly the same as she had an hour earlier. Same navy dress. Same composed expression. Yet everything about how others perceived her had transformed because context had changed. Or perhaps the truth had simply surfaced. Miss Eleanor Whitmore, the chair said warmly. Applause began. Not casual politeness. Genuine recognition. Jason did not clap. He could not. Vanessa whispered, Tell me she is. Not who I think she is. Jason answered honestly for once. I do not know who she is. The chair continued. As many of you know, Chairman Robert Whitmore's health has been a subject of private concern within close circles for some time. A murmur passed through the room. Jason felt the name hit him with delayed force. Robert Whitmore. Not just wealthy. Legendary. The kind of name attached to skyscrapers, acquisitions, endowments, headlines. Following recent developments, the chair continued carefully. The family enters a period of transition. Transition. The same word Jason had overheard earlier. Eleanor accepted the microphone only briefly. Thank you for your kindness, she said. Her voice was calm, measured, familiar in a way that suddenly felt painful. Tonight is about the foundation, not my family. I appreciate your discretion. The restraint in that sentence told Jason more than any dramatic announcement would have. She could have claimed the room. Instead, she redirected it. That somehow made her seem even more powerful. After polite applause, the formal program resumed, but the ballroom had shifted permanently. Information moved fast among the influential. Conversations changed tone. Jason watched executives reposition themselves for introductions. Vanessa stared openly. Robert Whitmore? Apparently. Jason. Her voice sharpened. Do you understand what this means? He did. At least partially. Whitmore Global Holdings had holdings in finance, logistics, hospitality, tech infrastructure. Numbers too large to emotionally process. Generational wealth beyond ordinary imagination. No, he said quietly. Not fully. Vanessa laughed once, without humor. You were married to this woman. Stop saying it like that. Like what? Like you somehow misplaced the detail that your wife belonged to one of the most powerful families in the country. Jason looked at her sharply. She never told me. Even as he said it, the statement felt incomplete, because memory was now forcing uncomfortable corrections. Eleanor had told him things, just never in the dramatic language he expected. My family prefers privacy. Things are complicated at home. My father is difficult. He had heard the words. He simply translated them into something smaller because that fit his assumptions. Vanessa folded her arms. And you never asked questions? Jason did not answer. Because he had asked questions. Just dismissive ones. Questions designed to confirm his own narrative, not understand hers. Hours from his past now replayed with cruel clarity. Eleanor declining to discuss family over dinner because business should stay separate from personal life. Eleanor recognizing names in the financial press before he mentioned them. Eleanor once quietly correcting his assumption about a market move with more precision than one of his own colleagues. He had framed every sign as coincidence, curiosity, or irrelevance, because the alternative would have required admitting he did not fully understand the woman beside him. A younger executive approached Eleanor, introducing himself with almost visible nervousness. She greeted him kindly. Another donor requested lunch next week. Mr. Ashford managed the flow with practiced ease. Jason noticed something else. No one treated Eleanor like a novelty. They treated her like continuity. Someone already woven into this world. Vanessa leaned in. Is she inheriting? Jason swallowed. I do not know. Then find out. That is not exactly casual conversation. Apparently your ex-wife is not exactly casual. The cruelty in that line came wrapped in truth. Jason moved toward the bar, needing distance. The bartender handed him water without asking. His hands were colder than he expected. A familiar voice interrupted. Richard Halston again. Complicated evening? Jason gave a strained smile. That would be one way to describe it. Halston studied him for a moment. Robert protected family privacy aggressively, especially after certain events. What events? Halston paused. Not my story to tell. Is Eleanor? Jason stopped, unsure how to phrase it. Halston finished for him. Integral? Yes. Successor. Another pause. That depends on definitions. Jason frowned. Meaning? Halston glanced toward Eleanor. There are positions one inherits by title, others by trust. Then he added, almost gently, if she is where I suspect she is headed, she has carried heavier things than most people in this room realize. Before Jason could ask more, Halston moved away. That sentence lingered. Carried heavier things. Jason had spent years assuming Eleanor lacked ambition because she did not perform ambition the way he did. What if restraint had never been emptiness? What if it had been discipline? Vanessa approached again, this time quieter. I looked it up. She held her phone low. A business article. Robert Whitmore. Estimated empire valuation in the billions. Family structure private. Limited public appearances. Succession speculation ongoing. Vanessa scrolled. No listed spouse. No visible children. Jason stared at the screen. What? That is the strange part. Publicly, almost nothing about heirs. Then she looked up at Eleanor. Which means if she is involved, this was intentional. Jason lifted his eyes just as Eleanor turned and spoke softly to Mr. Ashford. He handed her another document. She signed something with calm precision. And in that moment, one final fragment clicked into place. The whispered phrase from earlier. The only heir. Jason's stomach dropped. For the rest of the evening, Jason moved through the ballroom like a man wearing his own confidence as a costume that no longer fit. Every conversation felt distorted by what he now knew, or rather what he was only beginning to understand. Eleanor was no longer an inconvenient figure from his past. She had become the gravitational center of the room. People adjusted around her without being asked. Conversations paused when she passed. Introductions happened with care. And what unsettled Jason most was how naturally she occupied that reality. There was no performance. No sudden transformation. She had not become powerful tonight. The room had simply caught up to what she already was. Vanessa studied him from across the bar. You look sick. I am fine. That is not convincing. Then stop analyzing me. She set her glass down. I am not analyzing you. I am trying to understand how a man marries a woman connected to one of the most powerful families in America and somehow treats that like an administrative footnote. Jason turned sharply. You think this is about money? Vanessa laughed quietly. You are asking the wrong question. Then what is the right one? Why she never told you? Or maybe why she did, and you never listened? That landed harder than he expected. Vanessa had never spoken to him that way before. But the power balance between them had shifted too. Jason was no longer the composed, upward-moving man leading the room. He was the man who had visibly misjudged something enormous. I need to talk to her, he said. Vanessa held his gaze for a moment, then stepped back. That sounds personal. It is. Then maybe I should leave. Jason looked at her. Are you ending the night because my ex-wife turned out to be wealthy? Vanessa gave him a level expression. No, I am ending the night because I just learned something about your judgment. She picked up her clutch. Good luck, Jason. Then she walked away, not dramatically, just decisively. He watched her go and realized he did not care enough to stop her. His focus had narrowed completely. Eleanor was near a quieter section of the ballroom, speaking with Mr. Ashford and 2 board members. Jason waited until the conversation thinned, then approached carefully. Eleanor. She turned. Her expression remained composed, though something in her eyes suggested she had expected this eventually. Jason, can we talk? Mr. Ashford glanced at Eleanor, awaiting instruction. She gave the smallest nod. He stepped away, though not far. Jason noticed that detail immediately. Protection, proximity, trust. Eleanor folded her hands lightly. What would you like to discuss? The formality in her tone unsettled him. You. A faint pause. That is broad. Why did you never tell me? Eleanor looked at him steadily. Tell you what. Do not do that. His voice lowered. All of this. He gestured subtly around them. Your family. Whitmore. The fact that. He stopped, suddenly aware how absurd he sounded. Eleanor spared him by finishing the thought. The fact that my private life remained private? We were married. Yes. That should have mattered. Something changed in her expression then. Not anger. Something closer to sadness, but distant. It did matter. To me. Jason swallowed. Then why keep this from me? Eleanor was silent for a moment before answering. Jason, in our marriage, I told you what was relevant whenever it became relevant. That is not an answer. It is the truthful one. You never said your father was Robert Whitmore. I said my father preferred privacy. That is not the same thing. Would you have treated me differently if I had led with his name? Jason opened his mouth, then stopped. Because the honest answer was obvious. Yes, of course he would have. Different assumptions. Different deference. Different calculations. Eleanor saw the silence and understood it instantly. That is why. That is not fair. No. Her tone remained calm, which somehow made every word sharper. How many times did you ask me about my family because you wanted to understand me, not categorize me? Jason said nothing. How many times did you dismiss things I said because they did not fit your version of who I was? I did not dismiss you. Eleanor gave him a long look. You built an entire narrative around me being smaller than you. He felt heat rise in his face. That is not true. Is it not? Her voice stayed measured. You interpreted quiet as weakness, privacy as emptiness, stability as lack of ambition. You wanted me to perform value in a language you respected. I never said that. No, she said softly. You demonstrated it. Jason exhaled sharply. That is unfair. It is accurate. The words were not cruel. Just final. He looked away briefly, then back. Why are you here tonight? Foundation business. And the rest. Family matters. Are you inheriting the company? Eleanor's expression revealed nothing. That is not a conversation for this room. So it is true. I did not say that. People are saying you are the only heir. The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. Eleanor's face changed, not dramatically, but enough. A boundary had been crossed. People say many things. Is it true? She studied him for several seconds. Why does the answer matter to you? Because I was married to you. Past tense. That does not erase everything. No, she said quietly. It does not. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Jason shifted tactics, less confrontational, more personal. Why did you never fight for us? The question surprised even him. Eleanor blinked once, genuinely caught off guard. Fight for us? When things were falling apart. You never argued. Never begged me to stay. Never tried to. He stopped. The sentence sounded worse aloud. Eleanor's expression softened, but not in the way he hoped. Jason, she said gently, love is not proven through desperation. He looked at her, suddenly younger somehow, less certain. I thought you did not care. Because I remained dignified? Because you seemed detached? Eleanor exhaled slowly. Do you know where I was the week before we finalized the divorce? Jason frowned. No, at a hospital. He went still. My father had undergone a serious procedure. Jason searched his memory. A canceled call. Delayed responses. Eleanor saying she was handling family matters. He had been annoyed she missed a networking dinner. You never told me it was serious. I did. Not clearly. I said my father was in surgery. Jason felt the air leave his lungs. He remembered. Vaguely. He had replied with something distracted. Something forgettable. Eleanor continued. You asked whether I would still be back by Thursday because your colleagues were expecting us. Shame arrived slowly, then all at once. Eleanor, I am not telling you this to punish you. You asked why I did not fight harder. Her voice remained even. I was already carrying more than you ever noticed. Jason stared at her. Every memory now felt compromised by information he should have seen. Why stay with me at all? He asked quietly. Eleanor gave a small, almost wistful smile. Because I loved who you were when we met. And later, she said, I kept hoping he was still there. That sentence hit harder than any accusation. Jason lowered his voice. Maybe he still is. Eleanor looked at him with a kind of patient sadness that made the moment unbearable. Do not do that. What? Rediscover your feelings only after discovering my value in a language you respect. That is not what this is. Is it not? Jason stepped closer. I made mistakes. Yes. I was ambitious. Distracted. Arrogant, maybe. Maybe. For the first time, the edge of dry humor touched her voice. Strange how familiar that felt. Fine, he said. Definitely arrogant. Eleanor said nothing. But people change. Sometimes. I am saying I understand things differently now. That happened very quickly. Because tonight changed everything. Eleanor held his gaze. For you. Before he could answer, Mr. Ashford approached with quiet urgency. Miss Whitmore, the board call is ready. Eleanor nodded. Jason caught the phrase immediately. Board call. Not invitation. Expectation. Eleanor, wait. She paused. Yes. Can we talk again? She considered him for a long moment. Perhaps. If there is something worth discussing. Then she turned and walked away with Mr. Ashford, leaving Jason standing in the middle of a room where, for the first time in years, he understood exactly what it felt like to be the one left behind.